Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. When I was in my early 20s, around 2018 or so, I worked as a resident advisor for my university. It was a student job where I got free housing in exchange for managing one of the floors in a dorm building. The gig was pretty straightforward, helping students with housing issues, keeping office hours, occasional weekend duty shifts, and making sure people followed the rules. Most of the policies were common sense stuff like keeping noise down after 9 p.m., no running in the halls, that kind of thing. If someone broke a rule, you'd give them a warning and document it in case it became a pattern. Certain violations, like smoking indoors or property damage, came with fines. One policy that really irked me was the lockout fee, $25 if you got locked out of your room, or a whopping $500 if you lost your key and they had to rekey the lock. My first year on the job, I never charged students for letting them back into their rooms. I was a broke college kid myself, so I knew how much $25 could mean. Luckily, the resident manager at the time, let's call him Alex, was cool about it and didn't make us hassle the students over lockouts. But then Alex graduated, and we got a new RM the next year. This dude, we'll say his name was Brad, was one of those overly friendly guys who got way too close for comfort. You know the type, always touching your arm or shoulder when talking to you. Ugh. In our first staff meeting, Brad went over the whole spiel about the master keys. We each got assigned one key for our floor, and there was a shared duty set of keys that got passed around on weekends. Brad made a huge deal about how if we lost our master key, we'd be fired and fined a mind-blowing $12,000 to rekey the entire floor. A few weeks in, I'm doing rounds with my friend Jess, who confides that Brad had been making inappropriate comments and touching her without consent. I knew he was overly handsy, but I had no idea the extent. Jess didn't want to officially report him, since Brad was this big shot in the housing department, but she asked me to stick by her side whenever he was around. I talked to another female RA I was friends with, and she said the same. Brad gave her a weird vibe and she tried to avoid being alone with him. So I made an effort to always linger after meetings until Jess and the other women could leave, blocking Brad from cornering them. Through that whole year, I kept doing what I'd done before, documenting major incidents but never charging students for lockouts. Until one weekend when Brad spotted me letting a student into their room. We had a chat, I explained it was just a lockout, but Brad wasn't having it. He pulled up my reports and saw I'd never once charged a student, then accused me of essentially stealing from the university. What a joke. I got called into the office, but the disciplinary thing went nowhere after I stood my ground. Still, it definitely soured my view of Brad even more. Fast forward a few months, and Jess is in tears. Turns out a couple nights earlier, she'd been out drinking and sleeping it off when a student got locked out. Half awake, she let them in with her master, but then accidentally tossed the key in the trash. By the time she realized, it had been hauled off to the dump already. Jess was freaking out about losing her job and housing, not to mention that $12,000 fee. We tried to think of a solution that didn't involve reporting the missing key and facing those consequences. After some brainstorming, we hatched a plan to get a new key copied without anyone finding out. We only had a short window before Brad did a random key check, so we had to move fast. We found this key blank online that looked like it might match the university keys and ordered it. The idea was to take the spare key from the duty set midweek, get it copied somewhere, then use a friend's hammer stamps to imprint the correct key code from Brad's log. I snuck into Brad's office one night to grab that code, giving some BS excuse about needing to file a report when he caught me in there. Heart was pounding, but I played it cool and filed a fake report to cover my tracks. When the key blank finally arrived, it seemed like a perfect match except for this huge brand name stamped right on it. A dead giveaway, it was a copy. We made one anyway, just in case Jess needed to use it temporarily. But we were dejected, thinking our whole plan was a bust. Then Jess pointed out the obvious. Why couldn't we just use the codes from the spare duty key and copy that one instead? That's when we realized Brad had accidentally given Jess his own master key months ago during that first meeting. We didn't need to do anything else. 2 weeks went by, and shockingly no one noticed the duty set was short a key. We got impatient waiting, so I faked a lockout situation to force the issue. Another RA couldn't get any of their keys to work, called Brad, and he had to bring Jess's spare over to let us in. Her key worked flawlessly. All hell broke loose once they figured out a master was missing. There was a building-wide search, room inspections, you name it. The big bosses grilled each of us RAs, but only Jess and I knew the truth, so we played dumb. In the end, they had to rekey everything at huge expense. But since Brad had totally botched the keylog procedures, there was no way to prove who was responsible. We all got reamed about key security, but most of the heat was on Brad for his negligence. Instead of firing him like they claimed they would, the bosses just fined Brad out the wazoo. I never found out exactly how much, but he was livid about it. He got reassigned to a different dorm after that and ended up losing his job a year or two later over yet another incident involving a female student. So that's my tale of accidentally outsmarting the creepy resident manager and saving my friend's job, all because the guy couldn't follow his own ridiculous rules. Hopefully it gave you a laugh or two along the way. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 20 years and never had any issues with neighbors or the homeowners association. That all changed when Helen moved in across the street last year. From day one, she made it her mission to stick her nose in everyone's business. The problem started small at first. She would leave notes complaining about my mailbox being too close to the street or that my lawn wasn't mowed straight enough. I mostly ignored her nitpicking, which just made Helen angrier. One Saturday afternoon, I was repairing my back fence, which had been damaged in a storm. I was almost finished when I heard Helen yell from across the street. "What do you think you're doing over there?" she shouted. I waved politely. "Just fixing my fence. It was damaged in the storm last week." "You can't just build a fence wherever you want," Helen snapped. "That's going to block my view. Tear it down immediately." I was stunned. "Excuse me? This is my property that I'm repairing. I'm not encroaching on anyone else's land." "I don't care whose property it is. I won't have you ruining my view," she huffed. "As a member of the homeowners association, I order you to remove that fence right now." I tried to explain calmly that she had no authority over what I did on my own land, but Helen refused to listen. She stormed off yelling that she would take care of this herself. Later that evening, I got a visit from a police officer saying he received a complaint about me building an illegal fence. I showed the officer my property deed and survey map, pointing out exactly where my land boundaries were. The fence was well within my property. The officer took a look and agreed I wasn't doing anything wrong. He apologized for bothering me and said it was clearly just a dispute between neighbors. I thought that was the end of it. But Helen wasn't done yet. The next weekend while I was away, she hired a crew to tear down my newly rebuilt fence. By the time I returned, over 60 feet of fencing had been destroyed. I immediately called the police to report the vandalism. But when the cops showed up, Helen gave them some bogus paperwork claiming the homeowner association had authorized the fence demolition. She pointed out where the property line was according to her documents. The police believed her story and said it was now a civil matter that needed to be resolved in court. I couldn't believe it. The evidence clearly showed Helen had trespassed and damaged my property. I contacted my lawyer, who helped me file a lawsuit against both Helen and the homeowner association for the illegal destruction of my fence. I made sure to include a copy of my property deed and survey map with the court documents. When we finally had our day in court, the judge reviewed all the evidence. He took one look at my deed and survey results and said, "It's clear the fence was well within your boundaries. This homeowner association and Miss Helen had no right to remove it." Helen threw a fit, insisting the homeowner association documents were correct about the property lines, but the judge shut her down. "The plaintiff's deed and survey take precedence here. Your homeowner association maps are clearly incorrect according to the legal property boundaries," he ruled. The judge ordered Helen and the homeowner association to pay for repairs to my fence, plus damages for the hassle they caused. He also barred them from setting foot on my land without permission in the future. As we left the courtroom, Helen gave me a hateful glare. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll get you for this." I held up a copy of the judge's ruling and waved it in her face. "See you back here when you violate this restraining order," I said with a grin. Having the deed to my property and official survey results saved me in the end. The judge quickly recognized that Helen and the homeowner association overstepped their bounds. It felt good to finally put homeowner association Helen in her place after all the complaints and harassment over the years. She messed with the wrong homeowner. The next one is a petty revenge story. When I was 23, I was in my first somewhat long-term relationship, and my first relationship in which we lived together. It was a bit rocky, we both caused a lot of problems in the relationship, but we finally broke up when I found out my boyfriend had been cheating on me regularly. He had also been lying about working an unpaid internship that would have transitioned to a job, which allowed him to spend hours going out with other women and excused his lack of income, so I was partly supporting him financially along with his mom, who he was also lying to. Even though my relationship with him was never stable, his mom loved me and would often openly take my side when we were fighting. She had 4 sons and no daughters, and she told me she considered me the daughter she never had. So when the cheating and lying was uncovered, it wasn't hard to get her to take my side. She was the person I went crying to, and I told her that this is the sort of thing you cry about to your mom, and since I don't have a relationship with my own mom, I was glad she was there for me to talk to. She was, of course, furious with him for lying to us both, effectively scamming us out of our money, and for cheating on me. Even when he complained to her about everything I had done wrong in the relationship, she refused to believe him because in her eyes, I could do no wrong. She sat him in front of a computer and made him apply for jobs in front of her, then supervised his job search process the way one might supervise a child cooking for the first time. Once he found a job, she made him pay us both back for the money we spent supporting him while he was lying to us. After he had finished paying us back and moved out of her place, she spoke to him rarely and was very clear that she no longer trusted him. She even warned his next girlfriend that he was a cheater, and from what I've since heard she was right to, as he has apparently cheated on other girlfriends since. She and I remained close until she passed away 2 years ago. She was one of the maybe 3 people I've ever felt I could be truly vulnerable with. She was the only person I told about a particularly difficult mental health situation I was going through, and I really did start to see her as a surrogate mother. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Context. This happened a few years ago. I was 18 and working as a receptionist for a community nursing service. As the youngest in the team by a long shot, the average age of employees being around 55, 60, I was usually the one responsible for the computer stuff, mostly just simple things. Nothing a quick Google couldn't solve. The other staff members were wonderful, and I learned a lot from working with them, except for the assistant manager, Karen. This woman was the bane of my existence. She was 75 plus, recently came out of a 15-year retirement as a receptionist, and was armed with a certificate in business management from a 4-hour online course. She refused to use basic computer skills such as Word or email, stating that she didn't need to learn them again when she had others to do it for her, namely me. In a 5-hour shift, I would spend 3 hours just fielding her tasks. Needless to say, this came along with all the fun personality traits that make a manager from hell. Malicious compliance. At the start of my shift, I receive an email from Karen asking me to print the attached files. One was a PDF and the other an MP4. So, assuming she meant just the PDF, I take the printed copy to her. This is roughly how the exchange went. Karen: why do you only have 1 file? I sent 2? Me: you want me to print an MP4? Karen: isn't that what I asked? A monkey could do your job, and probably better at that. Here, I'm pretty sure she laughed at her own joke. Me, desperate: look, I don't think you understand. Karen: don't try and teach me. Don't forget I did your job for 20 years, and now I could have you fired. Already over it and ready for some malicious compliance. Me: okay, well, I've never printed this type of file before, so it might take a while. Karen interrupts: I don't care how long it takes. I'm your boss, and I've told you to do this. Once it's done, you can move on to the other jobs. I'm grinning ear to ear at this point. I get back to my desk and send her an email summarizing our conversation and explicitly clarifying she wanted me to print an MP4, to which I got a snarky reply: perfect. I spent the next 4-5 hours pausing the video every 2-3 frames, screenshotting it, pasting it to a Word document, and printing. The administrative tasks piled up. Not that Karen noticed, because she mostly spent her time reading magazines, talking on the phone. I felt bad as this placed an extra load on the other receptionists. However, since Karen was universally hated, they gave me their blessings. Once complete, I took about 100 pages carefully held with clips to her desk, and sweetly told her that I'd printed the other file. She looked smug until she saw what was in front of her. Page after page of almost the same picture as the man moves through the video, some slightly blurry, all in full color. She was furious, to say the least, but I was 1 hour overtime on my shift, and Karen knew that would already cause her some issues, so she let me leave. Though I knew it wasn't over yet. As expected, I get called into HR for a meeting the following week, where they accused me of wasting company time and not complying with management. I explained the situation in detail and showed them the email, including her awful reply. I also showed them a few more emails and texts where Karen used some particularly descriptive words to insult our staff members, including the very HR rep taking my interview. Turns out this was the straw that broke the camel's back, as Karen had multiple reports against her from other staff members, and she had been driving HR insane with her own complaints. She lost her job the following week. The best part is that this happened on a Sunday, where I got double pay. I took some of that sweet overtime cash and brought in cupcakes to work once Karen was gone. I said it was an end-of-week treat, but we all knew what we were celebrating. The HR rep seemed to particularly enjoy hers. The next one is an entitled People Story. It's about what my family did to me on Christmas Eve. Back at work, word of what happened with my family spread around the office when it shouldn't have. I talked about it to just one friend at lunch a few days after making my first Reddit post, and the office gossip just happened to be hiding nearby, listening to every word I said. Within days, it was all over the office. And someone in the office was apparently social media friends with my brother. In short, my family found out about my Reddit post, and they went off about how they thought I was a brat who couldn't take a joke. I told them the 400 NTA comments said otherwise. Then they tried to say I didn't tell the truth. I asked them to read the post over the phone and tell me what in it was a lie. Well, their recollection was suddenly quite bad, because I made it clear every detail was on point. I even still have the messages from them confirming numerous details. They tried gaslighting, but I wasn't having it. I was never going to let them try to rewrite history again. My mother resorted to crocodile tears and guilting, but I called her and my father out as self-serving narcissists who played favorites, and would rather make me the bad guy so they wouldn't have to feel bad about themselves. They didn't deserve to berate me, or cry for sympathy when they were complicit in my misery since childhood. Then I hung up on them. They tried calling back again and again, but I refused to pick up, and I deleted all of their voicemails. But I kept the text just in case I'd need to go to a lawyer. More people in the extended family were made aware after links to my Reddit account got around. Initially, some sided with my parents and brother, but quickly switched sides when they saw the writing on the wall. My parents then tried to turn my brother into the new scapegoat for the situation since it couldn't be me. And then it turned into a chicken fight. After about 2 weeks, my parents showed up at my door to try and get me to talk to them, but I refused. I found out later that other relatives called them 50-plus-year-old children, and they owed me a lifetime of apologies. My brother apparently doubled down that what they did was funny, and refused to admit any wrongdoing. But his wife and even his own kids were furious at him. He was made to delete the videos he recorded of me at Christmas by the rest of the family, and he blamed me for it because I ruined his best prank yet. My Sil ended up slapping him and calling him a man-child, then saying she'd never been so humiliated to be his wife. She was apparently unaware of what my family put me through growing up until the Christmas prank because I'd hardly seen her before cutting contact with my family. Then she gave him an ultimatum: marriage counseling and a sincere apology to me, or she would leave him. My brother stubbornly refused, and his wife took the kids and left for a few days. He then came to my house while intoxicated and yelling that it was all my fault, and I was an idiot baby who couldn't take a joke. Then he started demanding I talk to his wife and fix things. I had to call our parents to come get him before I had police take him away. They showed up mortified and screaming at him to shut the hell up. After a few more days, my parents begged me to come over and speak to them. Took me a while to agree. And when I did, my brother was there with them looking like a kicked puppy. His wife had actually gone to get a consultation from a divorce lawyer, and my brother finally realized this was for real, and unless he acknowledged he was a massive a-hole, his life would be ruined. His wife did come back for the sake of keeping the kids in school, but even after months, my brother is still in the doghouse. My brother and parents apologized and admitted they never expected me to show up with such nice gifts, and figured I wasn't likely to bring anything since I hadn't seen them in years. And they'd pranked me so much that it finally clicked with them why I'd previously gone no contact. And even though I showed up with real gifts, they went ahead with their plan anyway since the prank gifts were already there under the tree, and they somehow thought I'd share in the humor. They thought wrong. I told them they would never be apologizing like this if they weren't being humiliated for their actions, to which they actually agreed and started trashing themselves. Then I asked if the apologies they'd given me before were totally insincere and just a ploy to lure me back into the family. They couldn't say they were or weren't. I'm not sure even they know anymore. So then I had a very frank discussion with them about my childhood and why I might never want to associate with them ever again. They didn't argue with a single point I made. All the mistreatment, all the favoritism, all the scapegoating. Why? Because I was the unwanted child. I didn't ask to be born. And it sure as hell shouldn't have taken that long just for them to realize what kind of steaming piles of crap they were as people. They just sat there looking at the floor while I ranted at them. And my mother was crying and blaming herself and my father. And my father started blaming her and saying it all started with her. My brother, for once in his life, knew when to shut the hell up and accept fault. And when he finally did speak, he owned up to everything. Since it was too late to return the gifts to the store by the time I'd made my AITA post, the presents I took back were left in my garage, just sitting in a pile. I ended up donating all of them to a local church for a charity rummage sale. So all of that stuff went to people other than my relatives. I was chastised by many for taking the gifts back from the kids too, but they were sharing in the delight of laughing at me that day. And now they have a lesson in consequences that it was good to have while still young. That said, my mother kind of negated that by going rogue and bought the exact same tablet DVD combo players for the kids that I did. My father was apparently furious with her at first because she put it all on their credit card. Each of those tablets was around $150. But the fight about it didn't last long. My brother and Sil have been going to marriage counseling, and it's forced my brother to open his eyes. Our parents raised him to be the way he is, but he also kept it up well into adulthood. I've kept moderate contact with my family for the sake of getting to know my nibblings, and they're actually good kids. They don't blame me for taking the gifts back anymore, because they understand how angry I was at Christmas. I had my birthday in March at a local pizza parlor, and my family were invited. It was literally their last chance, and shockingly, they did not blow it. They couldn't figure out what to get me, so they gifted me a large card with $100 cash in it, and a "will do better" apology written in the card. They also gave my girlfriend a set of sterling silver earrings, big apology, as a makeup for Christmas since she'd refused to see them in person till then. It hasn't really been long enough since then for me to have any other kinds of details other than things seem to be pleasantly normal now. No more pranks to me. They've even stopped doing them to each other. The whole situation just ruined what made it funny for them to begin with. Also, for all those who prior commented or DM'd me saying tablet DVD player combos don't exist, look them up, for crying out loud. They do exist, and kids who have them love them. The ones my mother got my nibblings have barely left their hands since getting them. Lastly, I did report the office gossip that caused me to get ratted me out to my brother to HR, and that was just one thing in a line of complaints against them. So they were finally written up, and has been avoiding me as much as possible at work since then. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.